So the first ICF event I ever went to was in Casa Grande, Arizona, and it was this thing that the Phoenix chapter and the Tucson chapter used to come together midway. And I got to see really great speakers that day. And one of them was a high dollar ticket coach. And what she said was, a broke coach does no one any good. And by the way, the person who I was sitting next to who brought me was head of the Phoenix chapter and very much into the coaching methodology of only ask empowering questions. So bear that in mind. So a broke coach does no one any good. And the second thing that she said was, if you've got the answer, tell them.
Mm,
They're paying you for the answer.
they're paying for the answer.
So as ICF coaches, we think that we are brought along in the methodology of ask empowering questions. The answers are within, but sometimes they aren't.
Mm.
And so I think that's why when you said, do you want to talk about coaching versus advising? I was like, yes, I have opinions on, oh, well, you know me,
I
I
got
have an,
opinions.
I always have an opinion, but I do have an opinion on that.
There's so many different lanes and avenues to go down with that. First and foremost is kind of the epidemic of the broke coach, which I
Yes.
absolutely want to dive into. Maybe not today, maybe we'll get to another one, but
Yeah.
it is a pandemic epidemic like of grand
Yeah.
proportions, and people are
Yes.
selling a book of lies to get you to spend more money and make them
Yes.
rich. Um,
Yes.
And
Uh-huh.
also the mindset that leaks into your coaching sessions when you have that scarcity mindset of like, I just
Yes.
need to sell this business. I just need this client to stay on board. And it creates the really gross oversell,
It
and also
does.
codependency models that we see out
Yes.
there.
Yes, I would agree with that. Where, I can't break away from this coach because you've got this kind of lock on it,
Yep.
and that doesn't do anybody any good either.
No. And then when we talk about coaching versus advising, coaching, I would venture to say that is a much more intimate practice than advising. And so
Hmm.
people are entrusting you as the coach with a lot of personal details and dreams and visions.
Yes.
And if you are basically like leaning into that when you could be advising, there's a
Hmm.
different energy that's coming out of each. And I think a lot of people are crossing some hairs and wires and muddying the waters a smidge.
Yes. I would agree with you. And I think the other thing is I had a conversation with my executive coach about who is part coach, part advisor, and she said, "You're out of integrity, you're not a coach." And I said, "You're a strategic advisor." And I said, "Yes." And she said, then why not call yourself that or a business advisor? I can't remember, but an advisor. And I said, because unfortunately, the world comes looking for um, executive coaching when they're looking for what I bring to the table.
Mm. Do you think that's changed?
I think it's just starting to,
Because I
because
would
I
almost
think,
say that the word coach is becoming
uh-huh.
way too overused and a bit of a turnoff for people.
Yes, and yet I think sometimes the reason people get an executive coach is because a mentor, a boss, somebody that they really respect or report to says you need an executive coach because they had one 10, 15, 20 years ago and it made all the difference.
Mm.
And so I kind of have this niche where one of the things I've done is work with women leaders as they're stepping from just under the C-suite into CEO, especially of nonprofit organizations. And these are larger or moneyed nonprofit organizations. And some of them have been indigenous organizations, and that brings a whole different flavor to it. But having someone to walk you through the mindset shifting that has to happen when you go from running part of the organization, or oftentimes it's the folks who are in the development world and they know how to get the money and they have the relationships. It's an easier step for them sometimes into CEO position than it even is if you're a COO or something like that. And I think it's the relationships and the ability to make money that gets you into that CEO position. But now you got to balance the board, you got to balance yourself, you've got a family, many of them do.
Hmm.
How do you not let your relationship die because now suddenly you're like out every evening? And where's your boundaries and where do you draw the line? And how do you look at things differently?
That's a lot of facets to be
Yeah,
examining. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look if you've seen it, but so ICF actually just recently, like in the last 2 months, updated their core competencies to
Oh, I did not see
incorporate
it.
what we're talking about. And essentially, what it does is it says it acknowledges that the coach might know things beyond what the client knows. And so
Yes.
the only like change that I see is that there is now a more open door to offer it up to the client. If the client asks for it, requests it,
Yes.
and says yes to the approval of it. And again, it's
Yes.
it's all permission and safety based,
Yes.
because they were seeing, I think, so much rigidity in between that, like, am I the consultant, the advisor, the coach? And I think if we
Right.
use our time today to kind of like help people better understand, like, what are those roles, where do they work best, where do those like
Hmm.
lines of separation need to be, and where can they play in the same space?
Right. Yeah, I love that. And I've also functioned as a trainer from time to time because training leaders is in my background.
Hmm.
And so sometimes, and I always say I think in puffy clouds. So I'm a 30,000, 50,000 foot person, and I think in puffy clouds. And sometimes I speak in terms that people don't understand. And so I find that sometimes a good model, whether it's mine or somebody else's, I'm like, let me show you a picture. And I start, getting my phone out and pulling up, a picture of this. Look at this. Here's some structure to it. So sometimes I feel like a trainer
Hmm.
as well when somebody's stuck and I'm like, oh, there's a methodology for that you
Hmm.
could follow.
So a trainer shows the methodology, teaches. What would you say an advisor does?
I would say an advisor is probably much more on the do this, don't do that, or careful there. You don't want to, I would say here's a line between a coach and advisor where I would say, be careful. I don't think you should do that versus, well, let's explore what would happen if you did, what would happen if you didn't. And sometimes I think the advisor is there because they've been at a different level and they can see it more clearly than what this person can. And that was always my story in corporate life was you're at a certain level and you think you're like really informed, and there's a whole different ball game being played up here and maybe higher than that if you're
Hmm.
in a hierarchy, and most of us have been. So yeah, I think advisors can they're more telling you
Hmm. Based
than
on their
they
personal
are ask.
experience, based on their experience and
Yes,
career track.
yes.
Okay.
Hmm.
So the telling more based on experience, and then the coaching is the coach may have had that experience, but they're really there to kind of help you play in the space of exploring
Yeah,
different avenues. So the client is the one making the decision.
exactly.
Where do you see
Mhm.
mentor showing in? Is that I'm hearing a lot of similarities between mentor and advisor. Do you see any differences?
Oh, gee whiz. Yes and no. I think in both cases, so I served as a mentor before I got into coaching. I served as a mentor a lot. And what I found was that people didn't always do anything with the conversation.
Mm.
So I'd be like, oh, Lauren, oh my God, I've been there. Let me tell you how I did that. And would that be helpful? Yeah, okay, good. Da, 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 da. And I'd go through the thing. And then I would overwhelm them with
You fire
all
hosed
the,
them?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't talk fast when you come from near the Philadelphia area, then who
I
are
hear
you?
you. I hear you.
So I can feed a whole lot into a short amount of time. And nothing, some people would take it and run with it, or they'd run with a little piece of it. But oftentimes people were so overwhelmed they got into like, oh, I don't even know how to do that. That sounds monstrously bigger than I thought it was. So I think I did some mentoring. Now when I mentor, it's much more of a check in more often, only provide what's asked for or needed at that moment in time.
Hmm.
So it's chunk downable. But when I was mentoring, I was brain dumping
Hmm.
all the things.
Well, and how many
Um,
mentors actually get paid?
none. Well, I
Well,
don't
so
think.
so that
I
was
mean,
what I was gonna like scratch away at because
yeah,
is it the overwhelm or is it the personal investment in the actionability?
probably both.
Mm.
Because I'll tell you, times when I knew I needed to hire somebody to help me with X, but I knew it was going to be a pricey investment, I had to make darn good and sure I was ready to make that change.
Hmm.
Because and sometimes, coaches would internalize that, like, oh, they don't think I'm worth it or they don't see the value. Oh, yes, I do. I just I'm not ready to make that shift right now, and I know when I am, and I'm going to have to get uncomfortable, and it's like wanting to lose weight.
Well,
You
it's a
know?
lot of legwork, and there's mental overhaul, emotional overhaul, all that stuff. Like none of the
Yeah,
real work that we
right.
do
You're right.
is a checklist like touch.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I would actually say that the stuff that is doesn't have that lasting power. You might do the thing, but you're not transforming and becoming this new version
Right.
of yourself.
Right. Right. I would agree with that.
So who do you think is most aligned, or who would be kind of like the situation based or the profile of the person who would be best suited for an advisor?
I think oftentimes advisors, if people are taking advice from you, they want to know that you had some of that background before. And,
Hmm.
and that's the thing I see get people kicked to the curb, like, well, you weren't in this kind of role, or you were that, but you were in this industry, and I'm in that industry, and they're
Hmm.
very different. And I will tell you that yes and no. Usually, if it's people issues, they are universal. The language is different, the structure is different, but a good advisor or coach, because that is oftentimes a complaint for coaches too. They were in banking and I'm in construction, and it's not the same thing. True. And it's really easy to pick up the differences because you don't have to know it deeply.
Hmm.
But if I'm going to advise a construction leader on how to run a construction company, I better not play in that space if I don't know what I'm doing.
That is a very interesting and important note to highlight, because I think a lot of people get into advising because they're great at strategy and they're good at seeing big picture. But
Yeah,
I wonder how many of them actually know the nuances and the ins and outs and the
right.
regulations of the industry and the space that they're playing in.
Yep, yep. And I think, it again, if it's a people issue,
Hmm.
a leader can describe to me what all's going on and why that's different in construction than it would be, because I'm saying banking because I spent 37 years in banking and finance. And I don't work with bankers and financiers anymore. So there's that. But they can school me on what's different. And I can ask questions about what would happen if you tried this. And then they can give me the, well, it won't work because, and then I can provide some. So if we don't go either or, then how can you get closer to what you're asking for?
Okay.
So yeah,
So if I'm kind of summarizing this um, correctly, so someone who would be looking for an advisor is someone who's looking for someone who has a similar background, same expertise or higher, who can show them how to do things, when to do things, and why to do things.
I think so. Yeah.
Now, to flip that to a coach, what would be the best fit for someone that's looking to work with a coach?
I think if the coach, I believe in the chemistry call, where you're vetting a couple of different coaches. I've subbed under companies like Franklin Covey that will provide bios to a client and then say, here's Laurie, here's Lauren, and here's, Joe, a third one. And take a look at the bio, see what you think. And it's really a coaching bio with some, background in it. And then from there, that person says, yeah, I'd like to talk to all three. And then they see where the vibe is. I think you have to know what you're looking for. I have won deals based on we both grew up in the Northeast and I understood his background and what
Hmm.
he went through, even though I didn't go through it. He needed somebody that knew what he was talking about. So, because that formed a great deal of who he was.
Hmm.
So it can be really interesting. It's kind of like getting hired for a job. When I do resumes with people, I say, well, if you put that on, it'll draw some people in and it will repel others.
Hmm.
Take your chances.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing with a coach. I believe that you look at the skills, you look at their background, and then you see where the vibe is or what one offers that the other one doesn't. Our company has lost a deal at one point because our person didn't provide a another coach provided a strong framework, like a one, two, three kind of thing. And
Hmm.
that CEO was looking for that. We wouldn't have known that. Our guy actually had a strong framework, but it didn't come up in that conversation.
Mm.
So we didn't get the deal because somebody else offered something that vibed with that CEO in that moment.
Which is interesting because the 1, 2, 3 framework sounds to me more like an advisor than a coach.
Bingo. Yes, yes,
Yeah, it's funny. I get on all these calls with people. They're like, "So what's your process?" And I'm like, "Well, I
yes,
need to understand your goal, and we're going to explore your goal, and then we're going to understand your values, and then we're going to take it from there and see what happens." And they're
right.
like, but where's my checkbox?" Like they're
That's
so used to their curriculums.
yes. And they want it in a box, in a like coach in a box or give me a toolkit,
Yep.
which
Fix
is
my
very much the
thing.
one. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm going to shift your thinking,
Yes.
and then we can get to the, and then I'll train you.
Yeah, then once you get the foundational transformation, then we can start learning the skills and frameworks and all that
And
fun
then you'll
stuff.
look at it all differently. And you
All
might
new.
not even need the skills and framework at that point because the brain has shifted and the internalized who you are has shifted. And I think that takes small steps over time. I don't think it's an overnight shift.